At 68, Matt Lauer's life just took a dark turn. There is a moment in almost every life when the ground shifts. When everything you built, every early morning, every late night, every sacrifice you made in the name of something bigger, suddenly means something different than you thought it did. Most people go through that moment privately, quietly, without the world watching. Matt Lauer did not get that luxury. For more than 2 decades, his face was the first thing millions of Americans saw each morning. Not a news anchor in the distant, formal sense, but someone familiar, someone trusted. Someone who felt, after enough years, like a fixture in the rhythm of daily life. He sat across from presidents and survivors, and people carrying impossible grief. He asked the questions that mattered. He showed up. Morning after morning, year after year, he showed up. And then one morning he didn't, and everything changed. Most people remember the moment the news broke in November 2017. It moved the way only certain stories move, fast and personal and impossible to look away from. It felt different because he was different. Not a distant political figure, not a stranger. Someone you had let into your home, into the first hour of your day without ever thinking twice about it. But here is what most people did not follow. Here is what the headlines never quite captured, not the moment of exposure but the years after it, the silence, the legal wait. The slow and grinding process of a life trying to find its shape again, when everything familiar has been taken away. Because at 68, Matt Lauer is carrying something most people will never fully understand. And the picture of his life right now, the financial strain, the isolation, the questions that still have no clean answers, is far more complicated and far more human than anything a morning television show could ever contain. To really understand where he is now, you have to go back, not just to the career but to the person. To the way a man can spend 30 years building something so large, so consuming, so central to who he is, that he stops being able to see where the work ends and he begins. He grew up in New York City. He was not handed anything. There was no journalism dynasty behind him, no wealthy family opening doors before he even knocked. He started the way most people start, small, overlooked, grinding through local television markets in the early 1980s, working on segments that most viewers would forget before the day was over. He was not the star, not yet. He was just someone who kept showing up, kept getting better, kept pushing forward when it would have been easier to settle. And slowly it worked. Because in television, genuine talent tends to find its level eventually. By the early 1990s, he had made his way to NBC. And once he was there, something became clear. He was not just good at the job, he was built for it. He had a warmth that did not feel manufactured, a sharpness that did not feel unkind. He could sit with someone in profound pain and not make it feel like a performance. He could challenge a world leader and not make it feel like a fight. That specific balance, quiet, difficult, rare, is what separates the people who fill seats from the people who define them. In 1997, he became the permanent co-host of the Today Show. One of the most watched, most trusted, most culturally embedded programs in American broadcasting. Millions of people turned it on every single morning without thinking about it. It was simply part of the day, and now Matt Lauer was at its center. What followed was a run that, by any honest measurement, was extraordinary. He was there for the days after September 11th, steady and present in a way the country needed. He traveled to war zones and Olympic stadiums and disaster sites, broadcasting with the same composed, grounded presence he brought to the studio on an ordinary Tuesday. He built something real. Something that took decades and discipline, and a kind of commitment most people never sustain. And that is exactly what made November 2017 so disorienting. Not just the shock, but the impossible effort of trying to square what was being said with the man you thought you knew, because you thought you knew him. That was the part no one was quite prepared for. He had, by any visible measure, built an untouchable life. At his peak, his salary was reported to be somewhere around $20 million a year. A number that does not just represent wealth, it represents a kind of cushion from reality, from worry, from the ordinary friction and consequence that shapes most human lives. Money at that level does not just buy comfort, it buys distance. Distance from the kinds of problems that most people cannot simply write a check to solve. His home in the Hamptons, a sprawling estate called Stronghart Manor, was the kind of property that announced something about its owner before you ever set foot inside. Hundreds of acres. A working farm, equestrian facilities. The kind of place you build when you are not just wealthy but confident. When you believe, genuinely believe, that the trajectory of your life has a kind of permanence to it. When you sink tens of millions of dollars into the ground beneath your feet, you are making a statement about the future. You are saying, this is mine and it will remain mine. He had 3 children. A marriage to Annette Roque that had gone through its rough and public years, tabloid stories, reported difficulties, but which seemed, at least from the outside, to have found a kind of steadiness. He had the job, the platform, the daily visibility that had become the gravitational center of his entire world. What is easy to miss looking at a life like that is how completely it shapes who a person believes they are. When you are that embedded in the public consciousness for that long, when your face and your name are that woven into the fabric of everyday life, you do not simply have a career anymore. You are the career. It becomes your identity, your compass, your reason for getting up in the morning. And when something threatens it, when even a shadow falls across it, both things are threatened at once, because they have long since become the same thing. The foundation was cracking. And no one, it seems, could see it. November 29, 2017. That date carries a specific weight in the world of American media. The news broke early, fast. By the time the Today Show went to air that morning, the decision had already been made. Matt Lauer was already gone. His co-anchor Savannah Guthrie delivered the announcement live. Her voice carried something real, not broadcaster composure, but the kind of visible human struggle that happens when you are forced to say something in public that you are still privately absorbing. She called it shocking, she called it devastating, and watching her, there was no question that she meant both words completely. She was not performing grief. She was experiencing it in real time in front of millions of people. NBC had received a detailed complaint from a female employee the night before. By all accounts, the network moved quickly. Within hours, not days, not weeks, a 22-year relationship was ended, just like that. According to the network's initial statement, the complaint involved inappropriate sexual behavior in the workplace. More accounts followed in the days and weeks after. According to reports, the behavior described was serious, extending over a significant period of time and involving more than one person. Lauer released a statement. He did not deny everything. He said there were no words to express his sorrow and regret. And in those early days, he seemed to understand on some level that something had shifted permanently. He could not have known how much further it would go. The months that followed brought more accounts, more detail, more weight. In 2019, journalist Ronan Farrow published a book in which a former NBC employee named Brooke Nevels shared her account of an alleged incident during the 2014 Sochi Olympics. What she described, according to reports, was not ambiguous. It was not a misunderstanding left open to interpretation. Her account, as she presented it, described something deliberate and serious. Lauer pushed back. He published a lengthy, carefully worded rebuttal, disputing specific elements of her account and maintaining that the encounter had been consensual. His response was detailed in a way that felt legally considered, precise in a way that suggested he had helped constructing it. He was not simply denying, he was building a counter-narrative piece by piece. But the court of public opinion does not wait for precision. It had largely moved on. Not because the truth had been established, it had not, and no official conclusion has been reached, but because the pattern of accounts, the sheer accumulation of reported behavior, and the broader cultural moment made it nearly impossible for most people to hold any single case apart from all the others. The legal process, however, was slower, much slower, and legal processes are expensive in ways that most people never have to think about. According to various reports, the years that followed were consumed by negotiations, legal, financial, personal, of a kind that can quietly devour even substantial wealth. And this is the part of the story that rarely finds its way into the headlines, not the moment of exposure. That got covered extensively from every angle. But the slow financial erosion that came after that part was quieter, less dramatic, and perhaps for that reason less noticed. Strongheart Manor, the Hamptons estate that had once stood as the most visible symbol of everything he had built, began to tell a different story. At various points, according to reports, the property was listed for sale. The asking prices shifted over time. The timeline stretched in ways that suggested difficulty, not the smooth, confident sale of a man moving on to the next chapter, but the complicated divestiture of someone whose circumstances had changed in ways they had not chosen. His divorce from Annette Roque, finalized in 2019, added another significant layer. According to reports, the settlement was substantial. And when you add that to the legal costs, to the complete and sudden absence of the professional income that had been the engine of everything, The picture that emerges is one of genuine financial complexity. Not ruin necessarily, it would be unfair and inaccurate to present speculation as fact, but something clearly, measurably different from what came before. The visible markers of his former life, the property, the presence, the public identity began to quietly disappear, without announcement, without drama, just slowly gone. At 68, that is a particular kind of loss, because the money was never really the point. The money was a symptom of the thing that actually mattered. The work was the identity. And the work, without warning and without appeal, was over. There is a specific kind of invisibility that falls on public figures when they disappear. It is not the invisibility of someone who was never known. It is something harder and stranger and more disorienting than that. It is the invisibility of someone who was known by millions, who was woven into the daily lives of an entire country, and who then, almost overnight, ceased to exist in the public consciousness. Not because they died, but because the world simply moved on the way the world always does to the next thing. Matt Lauer has not returned to television. He has not written a book or started a podcast or made the kind of careful, managed public reappearance that other figures in similar situations have sometimes attempted. He has been, by any comparison to the life he once lived, remarkably and consistently quiet. Whether that silence is a strategy or a necessity, or simply the private expression of a man still trying to understand what his life is now, that is not something anyone outside his world can say with confidence. No insider account has fully answered it. No official statement has explained it. What has surfaced in fragments is that he has spent considerable time in New Zealand, where his girlfriend Shaman Abaz is based. It is a small detail, but small details carry weight. The decision to spend significant time on the other side of the world, far from the city where his career was built, far from the places where his name still carries all of its complicated weight, says something. It suggests a life that has not just contracted professionally, but has deliberately moved, as if geography can be part of how you carry something too heavy to simply put down. At 68, time announces itself differently than it did at 40. The questions shift. The ambitions that once drove everything begin to feel less urgent, replaced by something quieter and more essential. Questions about what remains, about what was real, about who you are when the external things, the salary, the platform, the recognition, are no longer there to tell you. He is not a young man with decades ahead to rebuild in the conventional sense. He is a man of a certain age, carrying a weight that most people will never be asked to carry, navigating a life that the world once watched closely and has now largely stopped thinking about. And in that quiet, in that particular kind of aloneness, something real is still happening, something that no headline has ever quite managed to capture. It would be easy and probably tempting to end a story like this with something clean, a verdict, a lesson. A tidy moral that lets you walk away feeling like you understand what happened and what it means. But that ending does not exist here. It cannot, because the truth is that none of this is fully resolved, not legally, not morally, not in any of the ways that resolution actually matters. The women who came forward, who shared accounts of experiences they had carried, in some cases for years, still carry them. What happened to Matt Lauer did not undo what happened to them. Their lives were changed in ways that are real and lasting, and that is worth holding onto carefully and honestly as part of any complete picture of this story. And Matt Lauer, whatever one believes about the specific details of what he did or did not do, about the degrees of culpability that these kinds of situations always involve, about what accountability actually looks like when the law does not provide a clean answer, is also a human being. In his late 60s, having lost in a single night almost everything he spent his adult life building, that does not make what was alleged acceptable. It does not dissolve responsibility. But it is not nothing either, because the weight of that kind of loss is real regardless of how you arrived at it. What this story quietly illuminates beneath all the specific details is something much older and much more universal than any one person's circumstances. It is a story about identity. About what happens when we build ourselves so completely around external things, around the job, the title, the recognition. The image that we lose track of what we actually are underneath all of it. About how easily and completely we can mistake the architecture for the foundation. About how little we understand our own lives while we are living them at full speed, too busy moving forward to look down and notice what the whole thing is actually resting on. Matt Lauer spent years at the absolute center of things. Millions of mornings, millions of conversations. An audience that handed him the first hour of their day, which is not a small thing when you really think about it. The first hour of the day is when people are most themselves, most unguarded. And he was there every single morning in that space. And all of it, every bit of it, came undone in one night. What the remaining years of his life hold is not something any observer can know or prescribe. Whether there is genuine reflection or regret that goes deeper than what has been said publicly, or some version of peace that he is slowly, quietly constructing from what is left, those are private questions now. And perhaps they should be. What remains for the rest of us is a story that refuses easy interpretation, a life that will not reduce to a simple lesson. A man at 68, in a world far quieter and far smaller than the one he knew, working through the only question that truly survives when everything else has been stripped away. Who are you really? When there is nothing left to hide behind. That question does not belong to Matt Lauer alone. It belongs to all of us. We just rarely have to face it so publicly, so completely, or so fast. If this story stayed with you, if it made you think about something beyond the headlines, about the fragile and complicated nature of the lives we build, take a moment and share your thoughts in the comments. These are the kinds of stories that deserve more than a quick reaction. If you want to see more documentaries that go beneath the surface and into the real human weight of things, subscribe and stay with us. There is always more beneath the story than what makes the front page.